What a buzzer beater. Look at that. So, for anybody that didn't know, April was in the middle of a computer restart, and I said, you know what? I have faith that that is a fast booting computer, and it was. Oh my God! Can we? Hi, by the way. It's nice to finally see you, but can we just talk about your background? Like,
Oh, thank
I look like
you.
a damn schlub over here. Um, I will say I am playing Grand Budapest Hotel in
Oh,
honor
which
of
is
Wes
such a good
Anderson.
movie.
Yeah. It is such a good movie. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the Tech Commute. It's Monday, September 29th. Holy cow, we're hitting Q4 already. Can you believe it?
It's wild.
For all of our events, obviously, you can find us at torque.community. Go check out Backend as a Service at AppRight, blah, blah, blah. And everybody loved my How to Commit Your Code. Shout out Casey and dresscode.dev. But no, all right, I got all that stuff out of the way. Let's get to this. I'm very excited to finally have you on the Tech Commute. Principal Cloud Advocate. Is that your title? Principal
That
Cloud
is
Advocate
my
slash
title.
AI at
Yeah.
Microsoft. I need to know what all that means because I feel like that is a very fancy title. But why don't you introduce yourself, ladies and gentlemen? April Gittens.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is April Gittens. I have been working in developer relations now since 2013, I want to say.
Okay.
And I am a principal cloud advocate at Microsoft. And so some folks may be familiar with the roles of developer advocates. And so in my case, yes, I am a developer advocate, but also with the focus on the cloud as well. And so, especially since our team at Microsoft, which is the company that I'm part of, not all advocates are developer advocates, but we're all cloud advocates at least. And so
Oh.
it helps to broaden the title a little more in saying that. But I am part of our AI team. We have multiple teams within there. I used to be part of and lead our spatial computing team. So back in the day when I used to do augmented reality and virtual reality and mixed reality, but as the industry has evolved and I've evolved as well and adapting to changes, I now work within the area of AI.
Wow. Well, it is so great to have you here. You popped onto my radar because your content is just fantastic.
Oh, thank
I know
you.
we've chatted about that a couple times, but I think that for me, that was the first thing that caught my eye. And then obviously seeing your career, I was very interested. And you just mentioned something AR at
Mhm.
Microsoft. As far as I remember, you guys were manufacturing the HoloLens. You developed the
Yes,
HoloLens
the HoloLens.
technology. Um,
Yes.
what's going on with that these days?
Well, these days, there is definitely a team internally that's still doing some work with the device itself. That is where my knowledge becomes a little limited, I would say, since I've since transitioned into a different team. But I will say, if anything, I've been mostly keeping up with what's happening outside of the company, but with other companies that are still doing things in
Mm,
the AR space. So, like, shout out to Snap
mm.
and their glasses that they have. We've seen things like Meta Ray Bans, for example. There's other companies like XReal that's doing work. So that's more so where I've been following in terms of anything that's smart glasses, AR glasses. That's what I've been keeping up with more so.
Nice. Now, I also see a 3D printer back there. I've
We
seen
have
you
two of
building.
them.
Oh, there's the other one. Yep.
Yes.
I see you building your own hardware, like little Raspberry Pis and other various
Mhm.
things. You seem to be a tinkerer too. Has that been something that has always been part of your kind of career or hobbies or life?
I would say crafting is really
Okay.
what was the strongest growing up. Even now, it wasn't until this year that I actually started getting into electronics, to be honest with
Mm,
you. And so a lot of that has come from where I see my own career heading and doing whatever I can now to gain the knowledge that I need to one day hopefully make that transition into robotics, which is the area that I would really love to get into. So a lot
oh.
of what you're seeing online these days is me literally starting from the ground up, learning a new area that I didn't really have any solid knowledge in. But where I'm fortunate is that I've spent years as a programmer, so I have the programming part down. But now
Yeah.
there's that whole electrical engineering side of it that I didn't have. So so I'm
Yeah.
now
You're,
picking that up at
yeah,
least.
tinkering in public, the new hashtag. Well,
Yeah.
let's rewind a little bit. So you said you got into tech around 2013, um, ish.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Um, what were you doing prior to that? Is this straight out of school? You got your first role, or maybe give us a little background
Mm.
there.
Yeah, I actually
April's
started out.
origin story.
Yes. I started out in luxury fashion actually, and I
Oh,
was a menswear stylist and a visual merchandiser, and it was a really great career path for where I was at the time. I was still in undergrad, and I will definitely say you don't realize just how much adult life costs until you're out in the real world paying
amen to
adult life
that.
bills. And I realized one day I could have stayed on that path in fashion. I had wanted to be a buyer. Like for those who don't know what a buyer is, they're the ones that are more or less responsible for what items you actually see in your favorite stores, especially if
Oh,
it's something like a Neiman Marcus, which is one of the places I worked. There's multiple buyers that are responsible for going to the different fashion shows or going to the different showrooms, and they're deciding, okay, this location is going to get these particular styles at this much quantity and these sizes,
hmm.
whereas this other location will get this, that, and the third. So that's the career I had wanted, but I actually had to talk with someone to realistically get an idea of what that career looked like in execution. And it was one of those situations where I'm just like bright-eyed, like, oh, that's going to be the coolest career ever. And the guy I was speaking with, he had been doing it for years, and he's just like, it's not as glamorous as it sounds. In the beginning, it sounds great, you know. And I think a lot of us can say that about a lot of our jobs. Like in the
Yeah,
beginning, it sounds great. You go to all the events, you know, you wine and dine people, but after a while, it starts to get a little old, and it was slightly discouraging, but also it was like it was something I needed to hear,
yeah.
you know? And also he gave me the reality of the pay. And so that makes a big difference for me at that time for sure. So I said, okay, I need to get into something that's going to definitely help me get where I wanted to be financially a bit sooner. And that's where tech came in. I ended up getting an internship with the Consumer Technology Association. There's the ones
Hmm.
that do CES every year in Vegas.
Yeah.
And I was in the IT department there. And that's really what kicked off my journey into being in tech.
And that was it right there. Well, what sort of parallels do you see, kind of maybe transferable skills that you had coming from like the fashion background that you've
Mhm.
incorporated into what you're doing here? I mean, obviously, we all notice the creative flourish in your content and that
Yeah.
polish and attention to detail, but what else?
So, you know how people like we tend to say when we're in school, like, where are we going to use this skill ever in the
Yeah.
real world? Like, when am I using this advanced math? When am I using this like random formula? But for me, it wasn't until graduate school, actually, I went to Savannah College of Art and Design.
Mm,
And in going to SCAD, it's a creative school for creatives. And
hmm.
so my courses were like required that you understand how to use Adobe Creative Suite, for example.
Awesome.
So I got to use a lot of what I
Yeah.
did in school now today. It's really helped me understand how to run and operate a business, for example. And even though I am working for a company, it gives me that understanding of these are all the pieces that come together to make this company work. And in doing that, it also helps me from a content perspective because I got to learn, like I mentioned, all the creative tools and how to use those. I got to learn more about branding from that as well. And a lot of, I know there was mentioned earlier, someone in the chat about my branding. A lot of that has come from what I learned in school, believe it or not. So, you know, I will say going to SCAD defied the whole you're not going to use what you learn in school in the real world. But I feel like I use my graduate degree every day
Yeah.
in way, shape, or form. But that definitely has made a big difference. Even just working in fashion and working uh, with different customer personalities on a
Mm,
day-to-day basis. Similar thing in the role that I'm in. It's a very public facing role. So
yeah.
you definitely get to engage with various walks of life. And you have to really understand and know how to meet people where they are, how to converse with people properly as well. And just from being in a customer service position for years, being able to make sure that either our customers or the developers who are interested in learning how to use our products and services at Microsoft, that they have an idea of what we have to offer, how to use it as well. And the last thing I'll add to that, specifically working in the fashion space, we were very much responsible for what is called product knowledge. And that's
Oh,
being able to tell you pretty much almost everything about the items that we have in the store, like its origin, the materials it's used, the process the designers follow. 'Cause keep in mind, I worked in luxury fashion. So that's like you're expecting a certain experience when
yeah,
you're
yeah.
shopping in those stores. But being able to fully grasp a lot of product knowledge in my head has definitely transferred to now, because being in AI, I mean, if I tell you I work in AI, realistically, Jason, like, what does that mean? There's like so
Yeah.
much AI,
Yeah,
right?
it's very open.
Exactly. But from a Microsoft perspective, for the products that I'm familiar with, I can pretty much tell you more or less like who's it for, what are the features, what are the constraints, whether one thing is better for you or another. So even though now my role is very much more technical compared to when I worked in the fashion space, a lot of the skills that I grew when I worked in that area has continued to show up now that I'm working in tech.
Awesome. I love that. So it seems like, again, kind of touching on the product knowledge aspects, like details are important. And it seems like
Mhm.
in fashion and then kind of transitioning over to tech as well, like all those like details really can kind of make or break it an opportunity with a product or a shirt. Do they even call them shirts in high fashion? I don't know. I feel like they
Well,
have fancy
it,
names.
it's a category of a top, but
There
yes.
you go. Oh, tops. Okay. Um, it was that attention to detail something you've always kind of had as a trait in your life, or was that something you sort of just gained through experience in fashion and then tech?
I've always had it. I'm a details person.
Hmm.
I like to notice the tiny things that may just be overlooked, that people might not think about. Because if you think about it, the tiny things is what makes up the whole, and you just
Yeah.
never know who's going to notice that one small thing versus everything else that's bigger. So for me, it's always been a details matter. And yeah, I feel like just over time that had just continued to have grown coming from fashion now coming into tech. And I think that's super helpful when we look at the end user experience as well,
Hmm.
and making sure that as best as we can, no detail goes missed. Even from a content creation perspective, doing the best that I can within my ability to make sure no detail goes missed, because for what you're seeing online that I publish, like I'm the person doing all that, Jason.
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
team that's doing all of that producing and the editing. And so I do my best to make sure that I pay attention to all those details, but sometimes that also becomes a big time suck,
Oh yeah.
because if you get too caught up in the details, then what should have took you maybe a day to edit and push publish, next thing you know, a week has gone by because you're stuck on this one tiny thing. And I know for the creatives that are checking this out, and probably yourself, Jason, you know what that's like.
Oh yeah.
So
I think we've all been there, and I think that like time management thing we lose too often. Um,
yeah,
Probably something that would have came up later because I usually love to discuss like people's productivity and like their tips and stuff. But since we're talking about it now, like
yeah.
how do you balance that? Or are you using any tools? Or I know for you, you're a lister.
Yes, and I was going to tell you, I've updated my workflows from when you and I spoke some time ago about how I am tracking everything. So
Ooh, I'm gonna need
I
those.
Yes. So believe it or not, after years of denial, I finally gave my life to Notion.
Oh no, boy, look at the time. I don't know. I might have to.
Right. Yeah, I was very anti Notion for years because
Mhm.
it just didn't conceptually make sense to me. When you and I first had our chat about how I manage all of my content creation, I
Mhm.
was very much a Apple Notes. If it wasn't in my
Yeah.
notes, I couldn't manage it. It was just simple for me, but I know from speaking with other folks, listening to other folks' opinions on notes, sometimes it just becomes like a dumping site for
Yeah.
ideas. And if you
Yeah.
don't have it organized, I can completely understand that. But mine was organized to a T. I had folders, I had headings, I had like everything. But the reason why I came over into Notion was one, out of curiosity. Even if I try something at one point, I'm like, I don't think I like it. I'll at least try again just to see, because things evolve over time.
Yeah.
And I ended up watching some YouTube video, maybe like 2 or 3 videos of someone showing how to do custom Notion setups. And I was at a point where I really wanted to do a better job at tracking growth. And that's what
Okay.
drove me to Notion, because it was a little more challenging for me to create charts in the way I wanted them to be in Apple
Yeah.
Notes, for
Yeah.
example, which is very limited in what it has to
Yeah.
offer. And wanting to just be able to thoroughly track how I was growing as a creator, that's where Notion actually stood out. So
Hmm.
now I actually have, in my little Notion instance, I'm probably not using proper terminology, but doesn't matter.
It's fine.
I have I have on my first page, which is like my landing page that lets me know what are my what are my tasks for today, what are my late tasks. Then I have what are my top 3 priorities, so P0, 1, and 2. And then below that, I have a couple of tables. One is for LinkedIn content, one's for my own personal Pretty Wired Builds content. And even in that, I learned how to make templates. So every time I want to do a new content item, I can just start a new template, fill out everything that I need, and I have all that pulling into dashboards
Wow.
within Notion. And so when it came to the dashboards, it's really been helpful for me tracking how many new subscribers or followers have I've gotten. And also I'm also tracking engagement after 1 month. So I can see, okay, what type of content's performing better.
Mm.
And people tend to like when I do things like this more versus that instead. Converting over to that, and it doesn't have to be Notion, but Notion I
Mm.
know gave me that option to see
Yeah.
that visually. So converting more into a workflow like that has really helped me with getting a better grip on the different content that I want to do, especially because I don't just only do my own content. I do stuff
Yeah.
at Microsoft as well. And so I will say it also helps me identify how much time I have, because
Yeah.
I'm a details person. It's very challenging for me to just turn the camera on for like 2 minutes, record, and then I'm done. Like there's takes that need to
Yeah.
happen, and maybe I didn't like the way I said it one way versus the other instead. And it gives me an idea of how long I'm taking doing content too. I've gotten to a point now where I know how long something can take. And if someone were to say, like, hey, we need a 1 minute video of you talking about like Visual Studio Code, for example, well, I know how long it'll take for me to come up with that,
Yeah.
but I didn't have that insight until I converted to something that was a bit
Yeah.
more thorough and robust of how I was managing my content.
Hmm.
So I would say tracking everything through there has been great. I've been toying around with the idea of showing how I organize everything through
Yeah.
Notion. So maybe once I'm done with some work travel, I might do a stream one day showing that. But that's how I've been managing everything, is through Notion these
It's
days.
Notion. I love that. I'd be curious. So now that you kind of have a workflow and you're able to calculate or figure out the time, how long does it take you to do a 1 minute video like that?
Am I also editing it as well? And I'm doing the thumbnails and I'm
Sure.
generating the captions
Sure.
for it as
Hypothetically.
well. Hypothetically, all those things. If it's a 1 minute video, I would say, and if I have nothing else that's popping up in life, I can probably get all that done in probably an hour and a half to 2 hours, I would
Okay.
say. Because you're going to get the April
Yeah.
level of detail to make sure
Yeah.
everything is just the way it needs to be.
Yeah.
And, you know, creating content like in the example you just gave me, it's more than recording the video,
Yep.
because the recording of the video for like a 1 minute thing, because I like to do multiple takes. And if I have B-roll, that's a whole other thing, Jason, if you got to get all the
Oh yeah.
B-roll shots. But I like to like block out 30 minutes to record because I have to time box
Okay.
it. And that includes doing various B-roll shots. That includes me doing my talking in different parts of like my office or whatever. That includes having to do a screen share recording if I need to. So 30 minutes for that. The rest of that time is then spent bringing things over into Premiere Pro. I just actually recently started using CapCut on desktop, but
Okay.
usually I'll use Premiere Pro. And I'll do the splicing and putting everything together
Hmm.
in there. I'll add an audio track. I'll adjust the volume levels and any sort of like transitions, and then I'll generate the captions. And I actually go word by word in the generated captions and edit them. And so if you're telling me I'm doing like a 5-minute video, well, guess what? I'm going through all 5 minutes of
Yeah.
those captions. So even for a 1-minute video is obviously shorter to
Hmm.
do that. But then I'll go through the generated captions as well. And then as part of this process, I'm creating the thumbnail over in Canva. And then I'm also creating the caption that needs to go with the video. So that's why I say about 2 to 3 hours, because all that to me means I made a 1-minute video.
Oh, wow.
I'm sure some people can get it done much sooner. So,
Yeah.
hats off to you, but that's my process if you want it done at the level of quality that I do it.
Yeah, that well, the level of, detail, and
Yeah.
it's definitely I mean, I don't know any sort of an average for a 1 minute video, so I feel like that's actually pretty good end to end. Um and yeah, CapCut desktop is fantastic. That's what I use. I pay
Yeah.
for the pro. It's very good. Um
But who I'm impressed by though?
yeah.
Not to say I'm old, but this younger generation that's like deep into social media editing and posts and all the transitions they do. Because if you just ever watched like a recording, like a video of someone editing something and like in real time,
Yeah.
they do it so quickly. And I'm beyond impressed by that. So I feel like you can definitely probably cut down the amount of time that I personally
Mm,
take for sure. But all that's to also say, if anyone else is exploring content creation, if it takes you longer than that to do a 1-minute video, nothing's wrong with that either, because
yeah.
we have to work at the speed that's best for us.
That's true. How do you kind of battle that inner comparison of seeing other people's content and then, having that sort of perfectionist mindset? Like, how do you know what you're doing is enough for you? Like, when did you get to that point?
I got to that point when whatever point in time I would have reached a level of burnout from trying to listen to
Mm,
all the advice around making sure your content has this and that and it follows this trend and that trend. Because at some point you just get tired.
mm,
And reality hits when one day you're just sitting on, let's take Instagram, for example, when you're scrolling, and then the most like mindless, unedited video has like a million
yeah.
likes, and you're like, you know what?
Yeah. I feel
So,
that.
because it's very, very easy to burn out when you're trying to constantly become a content production, like especially a solo content production agency, if you're not careful. And at some point in the past, I know I've hit that point where I'm just like, this is way too much. And you then just start to realize, like, I know someone has said in the chat, I think Seth had said that Seth doesn't edit anything. And honestly, I don't think anything's wrong with that, Seth,
Yeah.
because some really great content I've seen out there performs well, where it's like very clear there's either minimal to no editing. And if it lands, it lands. That's the whole point,
Yeah.
is for your content to land with the right people. So for me, it was just reaching a point of burnout at some point where I was just like, you know what? Let me scale back. Let me try to be consistent in how I do edit things. You know, and you probably experienced this as well, Jason. The
Hmm.
one piece of content that you didn't put a lot of effort into, that's the one that goes viral. It's always the one that goes
Yep.
viral. It's the wildest thing.
Oh yeah.
And it just is what it is sometimes. But
Yeah.
sometimes the ones you put a lot of effort into, sometimes those go viral too. But sometimes it's the ones that you just didn't put too much effort. Those end up being the ones that everyone loves for
That's
one reason
true.
or another.
Yeah, before like editing on your phone and everything started to be so much easier, and just like getting it to your computer to do it. Um, I would shoot everything shot by shot so that it was
Hmm.
all like I was doing like that in camera editing, if you will.
Yeah.
Which obviously wasn't an easy process either, but so as far as the content and then kind of balancing that between work, Like,
Mhm.
again, how do you decide where to like allocate the time? Because I mean, just based on what
Yeah.
you've also just mentioned, you're like going. So how do you
Yeah.
decide that? Because I think that's another thing with where we are is it's shiny object syndrome and trying to find that really good piece of content and where do I use this time? Where do I use that time? So how does it work for you?
Yeah, so Saturdays, I do no content at
Hmm.
all. No matter what. I cannot do any editing, no recording, nothing. So then that leaves Sunday to Friday to do
Hmm.
anything with respect to content. I've come to learn over time, Sundays are the days for like my personal content that I actually like editing videos.
Okay.
So because of that, Sunday is the only day that I edit videos really for the week if it's my own personal content. For work, I personally block my calendars off Monday and Friday just to catch up on any work that may have been missed that I need to have like serious, like deep focus into. And those days are reserved just for that because Tuesday through Thursday is when I have all of my meetings. And so it can be very challenging to context switch throughout the
Oh
day
yeah.
between filming something and editing. But sometimes Tuesday, as of late, Tuesday is definitely one of those days now. You may have seen some of the videos on LinkedIn for the Inside Azure AI Foundry. So for those videos, I've worked it out with my manager where Tuesday is like that's my day I commit to doing the videos for that
Nice.
series. And those are like 15-minute videos and they
Yeah.
include step by step how to do something. So they take a little longer to from the editing side. The recording side, believe it or not, is quick. It's
Yeah.
the editing for those, especially because and this circles back to what I mentioned around branding earlier. The content that I do for my job, not only does it reflect me, but it reflects Microsoft.
Mm.
So I really have to make sure that anything that gets published there is at the caliber of what Microsoft would publish. And so it does take a little more time to make sure I'm meeting all the things that I need to have done. So with that said, Tuesdays I usually have reserved for that, and then maybe I might get lucky and have like an additional set of time on like a Thursday to do
Hmm.
something else for work. And that's when I'll work on editing that content. But it's also football season now, which is great because Monday and Thursday and Sunday, my husband just watches football. And so I'm usually not watching often.
Yeah.
So that
So
gives
you've
me
got
like
downtime.
uninterrupted time to just
That's
focus
great.
on the content editing. So that's how I've been
Yeah.
balancing it all. But streamlining a lot has made a big difference too,
Hmm.
because I used to have a really full content calendar, and having to scale back from that a lot has made a big difference. It circles back to the whole comparison thing you mentioned earlier, because you'll see a lot of other content creators who presumably seem to be doing content like all the time around the clock. And it's like, how do they
Yeah.
have all this time to do it? And there's different ways people approach that. But I've also come to learn that I don't have the same life as other people and vice
Mm.
versa. And so it's challenging to try to work to someone else's level when I don't know all the details of their life that
Yeah.
enables them to work in that capacity. I don't know if they batched all their content a month ago and now all they're doing
Mm.
is pressing publish. I don't know if they have a whole production team behind them and all they have to
Yeah.
do is just sit in front of a camera and pass along the files. And I think that is what helps me from comparing myself to others, because I think if someone has all those things to work with, nothing's wrong with that. Like, if anything, that's the dream, to
Yeah.
have a whole
Oh
team
yeah.
that you can work with, to have the time to do batch content. But it's also not the reality that I have. So I
Sure.
do what I can, but not try to work at the level of someone who has all those things, because all I would do is just make myself just frustrated and overwhelmed. And there's so much more that we can do in life besides just being frustrated over not meeting someone else's standards.
Interesting. What would make you frustrated and overwhelmed about that? Like how would that go if you were in that scenario where it sounds like you'd ideally be super productive, but how could that be detrimental?
I I will tell you this. About 3 years ago, I
Hmm.
purposely stepped away from doing tech events
Mm.
and saying no to a lot of even like virtual things as well, because I personally wanted to just spend time with my fiance at the time, now
Yeah.
husband, and our dog. That's all I wanted to do. And I realized the biggest blocker from that was always being on, always working on content around the
Ooh.
clock. So for me, that is where I place a lot more value. And I knew at the time that I would be getting married soon, and now we're married. But I really wanted to focus on having that time as we get ready to, to find ourselves now married. And I'm glad I did that. It gave me the opportunity to also figure out the best way to balance my personal life and my work life. And then to the question, like, was it burnout? I wouldn't say fully at that point it was burnout. It was realizing that I was always on.
Yeah.
And so even like working as a developer advocate, this was when it was called Twitter, for example.
Yeah.
So like in the olden days of yore, when it was Twitter still, and like
She
a
called it
lot
the
of tech
olden
people
days.
were on there. Um, as a developer advocate, yes, you work your typical work hours, but then when work was done, guess where you are? You're still on Twitter. You're still talking to everybody. And because we're here to help a global audience, it was very hard to draw that line between, okay, work's done now. I'm gonna go do my own thing. But then people are still reaching out. And if you have that sort of like, oh, I don't want to leave somebody like flailing in the wind because they're
Mm.
stuck on something and I know the answer, but here I am on like Twitter just tweeting away. You feel
Mm-hmm.
bad, you ignore them. So you want to help out. But that has its pros and cons. And a lot of the cons was that I found myself always constantly engaged in that way. And I had a whole life outside of the internet that meant more to me. I mean, love the dev community, but all else fails, I have my husband and my dog, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I really wanted to make sure that I was giving the proper time to my life offline and develop a better relationship with my life online. And so now you're starting to see me do some events as well. And I would say the relationship with that has gotten better with
Good.
drawing that line between when it's time to work and do content versus when it's just like me really just chilling here at home,
Yeah.
not actually thinking about work.
Nice. What was it a particular like moment that this sort of hit you? Like, was there a specific event where like I need to kind of take a step away, or did you just sort of progress to that?
I would say there's not one key defining moment, but I think leading up to the engagement, I had a
Mm.
sense of an idea that it was nearing that time just from like conversations that we would have. And so I I just really wanted to make sure that I was fully present
Yeah.
in my personal life. And so yeah, and with that said, yeah, I would have had to have been about 3 years ago now. I'm thinking in terms of like where were we living, and yeah, that was about three
Sure.
years
Yeah.
ago. So it was a
Nice.
good decision. I see there's a
Definitely.
question about what type of
Yeah.
dog. He's a poodle. I currently don't have him in here because whenever I'm on camera, he thinks he's on camera.
Yeah. It's
So
his show. It's his world. You're just living in it.
oh yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
funny.
He's in charge.
Well, it seems like based on what you've told me, your fiance now husband understands your job, and you guys
Yeah.
communicate. Like, how important has it been to have a partner that like works with you in this kind of a lifestyle?
It's been really great. I remember one time I had posted a video on YouTube for something. Oh no, it was on Threads. I had posted a video of it was a Raspberry Pi build that I did
Mm.
where I made it like a gaming console to
Yeah.
play
Oh
Donkey
yeah. I
Kong.
remember that. I remember
Yeah,
that.
and like someone had commented like, why would you do that when you could just like go buy it or something?
Yeah.
And I told him about it, and my husband is very much not online. He is not a
Yeah.
social media person, but just like seeing his reaction where it was just like, "Oh no, we gotta say something back to them." I'm like, "Oh my goodness." So he's very supportive, but because he's not a social media person, sometimes I think the gravity of what we put on social media
Oh
doesn't
yeah.
quite transfer to like what that
Sure.
means on his end.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, he's still extra supportive. I would say 9 times out of 10, whatever I post on LinkedIn, because he is at least on LinkedIn. He only
Yeah.
joined LinkedIn like a couple years ago. He's like one of the first to always like it. And anytime I do have something going on that I like he happens to have a link to, he'll share it with his friends and our family as well. And so definitely beyond supportive. I would say understanding of when I'm recording, like it needs to be quiet
Yeah.
in the house, as well. And then usually when I'm done with editing something that I'm like super duper proud of, like I'll sit and
Hmm.
I'll ask if you can watch it. Sometimes I put it on the big screen on the TV, like it's like a
Ooh,
movie.
yeah.
But he's overall very supportive, very understanding of it, and I'm glad he's not a social media person. I don't think I would like that if we were both like very much into it.
Yeah.
More power to the couples who are both like really big social media folks, but I don't think I would like that.
I wouldn't either. My wife is very much not on, which is probably good because then she won't see some of the dumb things I say. But what's what's it been like? How do you know you've been on too much? Like, what are some signs for you that, because I was actually just talking about this at Commit Your Code this past week. It's
Mhm.
like, even when we're not at the conference, all that after stuff, like, I'm still there representing the company. I'm on.
Yeah.
Like, we're always on. We're online. We're front facing people. So, how do you know when it's been too much for you?
When it's past 5 o'clock. No.
I wish that was that easy.
No, realistically, that is something I've really had to develop is very strong boundaries
Mm,
with my own choice of what the exceptions may be. Because my exceptions may not be your exceptions for
sure.
when you would work longer than you need to. And so my cutoff time for working is 5 p.m. I start at 9 a.m., I cut off at 5
Wow.
p.m. And if I get past that 5 PM time, this is assuming I'm not like at an event, of course.
Sure, sure.
Events are like all day.
Yeah.
But if I'm like here at home, after that time, if I'm still working, well, now I'm still on.
Yeah.
And that's how I know I've been on for too long. But sometimes it's worth it to go outside of those time frames. So sometimes I'll come across folks who are a bit more junior than I am,
Hmm.
especially internal folks at Microsoft that are starting off. And because we're global, people live like everywhere. So I might adjust my start time that day if they want to meet to like chat about something, especially if there's like a
Yeah.
mentoring kind of thing. And those are fine. But I am careful to make sure that I'm not waking up at 6 a.m. for a 6:30 meeting 5 days a week. Like that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But every so often I'll do it. So I keep track of that,
Hmm.
but if I see myself working outside of my working hours too often, that's a really big indicator. And of course, Jason, my calendar for work is color coordinated with all my meetings. So that's how I'm able to
Obviously.
track how I'm spending my time. And if I have too many things happening before that 9 o'clock mark and too many things after the 5 o'clock mark, something has to change. I
Yeah.
can't. I'm past that point in my life and career where I am overextending myself to work towards any
Mm,
particular like career goal. And more often that does lead to burnout when you're overextending yourself. And that burnout has really serious health complications in most cases as
hmm.
well. And if you're not a healthy person, you're not going to be able to tend to the work that you're
Yeah.
doing as well. So I do a lot of tracking to see how I'm spending my time, and then I adjust accordingly. It's hard to adjust what you're not tracking, otherwise you're just guessing of how you're
Yeah. That's
spending
a
your
good
time.
point. Yeah.
So that's why I have all these systems in place to get an idea of like what's happening when and how often things are happening as
Sure.
well.
Now that makes sense. Have you been to that point? I think we've all been close, but have you recognized a point in your career where you were at that big B word?
Yeah, twice, for
Okay.
sure. It's happened twice, and both times it's been while I've been here at Microsoft, and
Mm,
so I would say I think the first step is admitting,
Yeah, it's
because
true.
because I think far too often we like to disguise it as something else before we come to terms with the fact that it is burnout. And maybe it's like, no, I'm working extra hard because I know I can get promoted if I do like this, that, and the third. And while that may be the case in some ways, I tend to feel burnout in my body. Like your body
Oh yeah,
tells you when something's just not right,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
Maybe you're like more tired than you normally are. For me, maybe you're super irritable. As nice and friendly as I might seem online, if I get to that point where I'm like quick and short,
yeah,
especially if it's with either my husband or my dog, for example, that's a sign in itself that like there's too much
yeah,
happening right now and I need to take a step back. So, you know, this shows up different for everyone, but I can
yeah,
either feel it in my body in terms of I'm just like super tired, or I start becoming very irritable. And that means that I'm trying to balance way too many plates at a time. And I've hit that point twice since I've been here, and February makes 7 years since I've been at
okay,
this company. So identifying it definitely is the first step, but even after you identify it, it's like, well, what do you do next? And this is where sometimes I feel, not sometimes, I do feel bad for people who are in roles where they don't have that support to actually do something about their
yeah,
burnout. And what I
oh yeah,
mean by that is if you're not within a company with the culture to enable you to take time away or to maybe decrease your scope, you are at a disadvantage because you know there are companies out there and employers and managers who will provide you with that space to actually like regroup, decompress, make sure you have a proper balance. But I don't I don't see that across the board everywhere, and I think that is super unfortunate. But for me, knowing that, you know, if I reach that point again, and in the past when I've reached it, I had that support to be able to go to my manager and insist, like, I got to take some things off my plate. There's a lot going on right now. And so, you know, doing something about the burnout is definitely worth it. And then once you've done something about it, the final thing is being able to identify signs of of it creeping back in,
yeah,
like
oh
later down
yeah,
the road. And so for me, like I mentioned earlier, if I start feeling myself becoming a little too short and snippy and a little irritable, that means it's time
mm,
to start pulling back on some stuff. Or if I'm realizing I have 5 days of work and that Monday and Friday that I mentioned that are reserved for catching up, if all of a sudden those are full of meetings,
yep,
that nope, something's got
yep,
to start going away on the calendar because I know my limits. And you know, I used to be a manager for a couple of years at Microsoft as well, and I would say what I think my limits are not your limits, Jason, you
that's
know,
true.
and
Oh yeah,
vice versa. And
yeah,
you have to be very careful with that because for me, and because I have so many systems in place, you know, too, I can get through like 6 projects in one day and think nothing of it, but that doesn't mean that's the same for the next person, you know? And when you start getting into management roles, you really have to make sure you're careful with that because you don't wanna find yourself pushing people too much. It's a delicate balance between pushing
yeah,
someone to the next level so that way they can continue to grow versus knowing when something truly is too much for someone. And the only way you can understand that as a manager is by talking with those individuals. But from your own personal self, the only way you get to understand what's too much for yourself is starting to notice, okay, if I do X amount of things, how does that make me feel? Oh, it's easy. Okay, great. I can maintain that. But if maybe I'm focusing on something that's like a certain topic that I'm not really great at, and now I'm like
mm,
in over my head, then you need to understand those things. And a lot of that has to do with self-awareness.
oh yeah,
And that's a skill I would say that takes some time to grow, but you
yeah.
have to be real with yourself.
That the whole time you were talking, I'm thinking self awareness so important. Self like that,
Mhm.
it's just kind of across the board, specifically speaking in this sense. But again, so many other things. The more you become self aware of your strengths and your weaknesses, and being able to be transparent, and communicate, it's definitely a superpower for sure. How how do you decide, or like what influences your content and your style. We're transitioning. I know that was
Yeah.
such a segue, but I want to.
No, that was a beautiful segue. That's fine.
Yeah,
So for me, one, it has to feel like me.
yeah,
And usually, if I work with an internal team and that they have scripts, if it just doesn't sound like something I would say, I'm not going to say it. It'll sound like it's not me.
yeah,
And so, if and when I have those chances to like modify something to be more like I would speak, then that's like always like super helpful. If it's content that I'm doing on my own, it needs to be able to be reflective in how I would deliver something, even just aesthetically as
yeah,
well, from like what's my background that I'm in, what am I wearing as well, because all those things make me me. And the second that I have to break away from that, then it's not going to be what you're probably used to seeing if I were to do the content item. But as of late, for the work content that I do, a lot of it's all focused around what is it that I'm currently responsible for. And so I'm doing a lot more Azure AI Foundry video content, for example, and it's been scoped to, well, what's the newest thing with Foundry?
hmm
So that drives a lot of what I do there, but also what are developers talking about right
yeah.
now in the industry? Because the last thing you want to do is like all these videos on something that no one cares about. So it's because like
No,
who's gonna
that's
watch
true.
it, you know?
Yeah.
But for myself and things I do with Pretty Wired Builds, I met with one of my friends. Her name is Jackie Sweet, and we had like a 15-minute like coffee chat from a branding perspective in
Mhm.
an area that I had wanted to grow with Pretty Wired Builds. And she had noticed right off the bat that for the content that I do there, yes, I was engaging with a whole new audience of people, but the people didn't know me. So I was like diving right into all the
Oh,
stuff that I was doing, but like no one
yeah.
knew like who I am as a person. So she had even suggested do more content that shows who you are and why you're doing this so people can become more familiar with you. And when she said that, to me it was like obvious, duh, why didn't I
Yeah.
think of that? And so a lot of things that I do there is focused now more on my own story of how I got into doing things with electronics. And that has made a really big difference. And so just knowing what the goal is and identifying those weaker areas that might be causing you not to really get engagement. I think
Sure.
that's what's helped me a lot with figuring out how to focus the content that I'm doing.
Nice. And since you kind of touched on it as far as stuff that maybe deviates from like yourself, like has there been something you're just like, I'm not doing this? Like this is just too
Um
scripted. You got like this is not me.
There's been times like that, and I
Yeah.
don't and it's not from the fact that the people were coming from a bad place.
No,
It was
no.
more so from the point of sometimes I run into people who will write scripts that sounds like what a developer would want to hear, but it's not quite something that's going to land well with developers.
Oh yeah.
But you also have to realize more often if I'm being pulled in to work in something like that, they're there not just for me to record whatever they write, but to also lend that like point of view as someone who is a developer that hangs out in the developer community.
Yeah.
So it would behoove me to actually speak up and say, oh, actually, they would say it more this way
hmm
versus, the other way. Plus, you also got to realize, I'm just going to be real, that a lot of people are using AI today to
Yeah.
to start as a starting place for writing like the content. And while sometimes whatever AI generates can land with whatever the audience, it doesn't always have that nuance that's going to be necessary for content. And so I think it's better to speak up rather than to just play along and then like things don't work out like the way everybody had hoped.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
have yet to encounter a partnership with either someone internally at work or externally where they've been like, no, we don't want changes, you have to do it this way. More often, like if actually every time people have been open to any pushback for changes. But I think also what's important there too is that if you're going to push back, you need to say why in
Yeah.
whatever way that makes sense. Because rather than say like, oh, I'm not going to say that, it makes more sense to approach with a suggestion and say why it would
Yeah.
land better saying that versus not. Because otherwise, you seem difficult to work with when it's just
Sure.
like, no, I'm not doing that. You know.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. All right, I've been in that situation where I did have to do that thing, and that will now
Mhm.
forever live as a specific
Ah,
video. Needless to say, I think that to your point, it is important to give that feedback, so it's not just you being that kind of curmudgeon that's difficult to work with,
yeah.
because you never want that reputation. How have you seen? Excuse me. How have you seen your content evolve? Like, what were those first couple videos like, and what were some things that you know, changed? I mean,
Yeah.
I know we all have them.
Yeah, my first videos was actually faceless. I had ended up subscribing to one of those platforms that does like it looks like the person was like illustrating with like a marker or
Yeah.
whatever. It was like that sort of video. And I was explaining Git or something.
Uh huh.
And it was using like it was doing the illustrations as I was doing
Uh,
it. And the only reason I stopped doing those videos was because I started getting comments on YouTube, and I think at the time, Twitter as well, where people who like knew who I was visually, they were saying, you need to be on camera because you and then this is again years ago, y'all. So they're
yeah.
like at that time, there's not a lot of black women doing content, technical
Mm,
content on YouTube. And so therefore you need to be on camera because you're helping with the representation. And I couldn't argue with that, Jason. I mean,
no. What do you say?
the facts were there. At
Yeah.
that time,
Yeah.
there was not that many of us. Now I'm so happy that there's
Sure.
so many other Black women that's doing technical content. But back then, there wasn't that many. And so I very reluctantly ended up recording myself on camera, and they were right. Like
Yeah.
things were taking off from there, and even beyond just videos, people were just happy to see someone they can identify with in the content. And I would have people reach out, and they would just say like on Twitter, like, I don't even know what you're talking about, but I'm just happy to see that like you're doing the content, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Same would happen, beyond just getting that sort of feedback from other Black people, but just like other people who are very kind and nice in the tech industry who are really like advocating for diversity. Similar responses coming back from them, and you don't realize immediately how much of an impact you can make when you provide that representation
Mm,
until you actually like hear it from others. Because like I said, I could have made a whole career if you would have let me just being a voice and that was
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But getting that push to physically like be on camera, that's where the content has evolved. And so these days I make it a point as much as I can to always be on camera. And it takes more work
Of
recording, I'll
course.
definitely give you
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But if it helps with anyone feeling whatever level of comfort or that they're seen and what have you, I think it's worth it at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
that's how my beginnings started to now to what you're seeing today, where
So
I'm
now.
typically usually on camera.
Yeah, no, everybody loves. Your content is creative and fun. We've got so many people just rave reviews down here. I mean, kind of being told like no one's doing it, you should do it, and being that piece of like representation. For me, just hearing that feels like that would be a lot of weight on your shoulders.
It is a lot of pressure. Yeah,
Yeah,
because I will say, not to pull the race card here, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Anytime,
that
right?
was me pulling it. It's
Anytime
fine. You got it. It's all yours.
anytime you enter into a space as an only, it's a lot of weight
Yeah,
because you might literally be the representation for like your entire group that you identify as.
yeah,
And that goes for all races, especially like for me as a Black woman coming into like an all white space, or if you flipped it and said as a white person coming into an all Black space, you are oftentimes that representation for everyone that's
yeah,
behind you.
yeah.
And it's not always a fair thing. but that's a
No.
reality because we're humans.
Yeah.
And so therefore it does put a lot of weight, and it's like, all right, I got to really make sure that I leave a really good impression, because if
Yeah.
someone else comes behind me that looks like me, I don't want to mess it up for them,
Sure.
because first impressions are everything. As much as people want to feel like, no, we're not going to treat everybody to say, no, people for the most part will
Yeah.
remember the
I
bad
th- I think
impressions,
I think
you
in your
know?
position too, like that fear of failure is 10x. You
Hmm.
know, when
Yeah.
you are that like minority trying to push through and do something,
Yeah.
yeah, psychologically that's got to kind of take its toll on you as well. Kind of make you think
Yeah,
about how you approach it.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I am very, very happy these days that we are seeing a bit more
Hmm.
diversity in technical
Yeah.
content. While there's definitely some key players that aren't as diverse that are still like ranking at the top across some of the bigger tech areas, we are seeing more minorities. And I don't just mean Black. And that's minorities across various
Yeah.
ways to define minorities. We are seeing more of that these days in content. And I'm honestly like super happy for that. And that's why I always like encouraging people who want to create content, like, go do it. There's, for the most part, the only thing that's really going to stop you is yourself. And so if you have the drive to go try it out and to go create something, why not do it? You might have to like build up a really tough backbone because of the internet, but
Yeah.
that comes with the territory. Not everybody's
Yeah.
going to like everything that you do, but if we lived our whole life afraid of what other people are going to think, like where we have gotten in, in
Yeah.
life.
So
So
true.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
So, yeah.
definitely true. So, from all of the content, we're kind of coming up on time here, which sucks because I feel like I have 100 other questions. But I want to know, like, what some of the biggest lessons you've learned about yourself creating this content have been.
I would say for me personally, I've learned that I really need to get a good grip on when good is good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm such a detailed person, and I mentioned early on, I could edit forever and ever
Yeah.
and
Oh,
ever
yeah.
and
Yeah.
ever. And by the time I publish, it's like no one cares about what I had to say
Yeah.
anymore. But getting to a point where I knew my boundary of what is good enough, and I think you may hear other people mention this in different advice around content, but I think it's like that 80 to 90%. Like once you get there, that's
Yeah.
good enough. Like go ahead and publish and do what you need to do. So I think for me, defining my own 80% good enough is was something that I had to come to terms with. The other thing too is I've come to learn that starting over is not the end of the world,
Mm.
as well, because when I was on Twitter, I think by the time I finally deleted my account, I was at maybe about 25,000 followers on there.
Mm-hmm.
And when you first start thinking about getting rid of an account that you've grown that has a lot of it, like a lot of followers, a lot of engagement, you don't want to get rid of that account because
Yeah.
that's
It's
like your
hard.
street cred. It's
Yeah.
like,
It's
look at
hard.
all these people that are following
Yeah.
me. But for what the platform became, I already wasn't really engaging on there. It didn't
Mm.
feel like the right place to still have a presence. But something in the back of my head was just like, oh, but am I ever going to gain that large of a
Yeah.
following ever again in life? And Jason, that's when I had to think to myself, but why does that matter that I have that
Ooh.
large of a following again in
Yeah.
life? What is that even proving? What
Yeah.
is that doing? Is it really just boosting my ego? Because if
Yeah.
that's the case, then I'm doing this for all the wrong reasons. And so for me, I had to come to a point where I had to learn what was my actual why for growing on social media. And I've come to define that as being able to help and educate people. And so whether it's 25,000 followers, whether it's 5,000 followers, whether it's only like 900 followers, are people following up with me to say they learned something, that
Yeah.
they were able to take something that I taught them and go do XYZ? That's literally what I'm also tracking on my Notion is, have I made an impact in someone's life based on the feedback they've given
I
me?
love that.
And so if I'm able to get that from people, that is how I've started defining success. And so getting rid of Twitter became an easier choice for me. Like, I'm human, so yeah, it hurt the day that like I deleted the
Oh
account, and then I
yeah.
was like, oh, those people are gone now. But people have since come and found me on places like
Yeah.
LinkedIn. There's some people on Threads as well, but not letting the numbers drive you a little too insane, I would say, and coming back to my why for why I do the content that I do. And so that was a really big lesson, is like really defining what does it mean to be a content creator, and why does it matter if I have a significant following. And if it all boils down to because it feels nice to have X amount of people, then I think you're doing it for the wrong reason. But if you're there to like
Totally.
help, at least for me, I was there to help, and that changed my whole view on growth and how I create and why I create content.
I love that. I did the same thing when I left the film industry. I was at about like it's very similar to you. It was somewhere around like 26, 27,000. That was
Mhm.
hard to delete. But I did. I got rid
Mhm.
of all socials. I just went cold
Yeah.
turkey, and you get like the
Yeah.
withdrawal itch. You're like, "Oh, I got to like
Yes.
scroll, doom scroll." Um
Yes.
but the why is really, again, when I came into tech, my approach was like authentic, just me and helping people, like get to
Mhm.
where I need to go and then give back. Like
Yeah.
that's it. So I love that you said that the why is
I had
always
one more
good.
thing on that too.
Do it.
You know when you're at a point where you're starting to get icky when you meet someone on like a different platform
Yeah.
where you like don't have a large following, and like you're just dying to let them know you have like thousands of followers on another platform.
Yeah.
That's when you know you're getting to an icky point
Yeah.
with growth,
Oh yeah.
because yeah, you're letting it get to your head. And I felt myself get to that point um as I was nearing around getting rid of Twitter, and
Hmm.
I'm just like, I'm losing the plot and the point here,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah,
So
it's hard though, because and you talked about it already, especially in these like front facing roles that we're in.
mhm.
It kind of just becomes currency for
Yeah,
what we're doing, and the more it is, like the more you feel like valued and relevant. But it's still you, and you're still making amazing content without that at all. So
thank you. Yeah,
no,
the right people
for
will find
sure.
you.
What's that?
Yeah, the right people will find you.
Exactly. Always. They always will. You also mentioned the wonderful word success, and I usually end my podcast with asking people what success looks like to them. But before you answer that,
Yes.
I want you to give me your top 5 movies
Ever?
ever.
Okay. This is in no particular
They
order,
can
by
be
the
in no
way.
particular order. That's fine.
All right. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
So good.
So good. I would also say The Wood. That was like my favorite movie
That
growing
is a
up.
really good movie.
Yes. Let's see, that's two. For a third one, I'm trying to think of all the Wes Anderson ones, which one's my most favorite. I would have to say, it might be Grand Budapest Hotel.
It's very
So
good.
yes. And then for a fourth one, I used to be obsessed with Oceans. So like
Okay.
anytime Ocean's 11 came on,
Oh
I
yeah.
like had to watch it. And then the fifth and final one, ah, Edward Scissorhands. I
Oh, that is a great
love Tim
one.
Burton. And if you haven't watched this second season of Wednesday, I'd recommend,
So
because I
good.
hated the first, really liked the second.
Really?
I think, yeah, I didn't like the first, but the second one was very good. Even had like a dream about it after I finished the like final episode. But Tim Burton is
Yeah.
like, we're like
Oh
this in
yeah.
his film. I love dark things,
Yeah.
and I don't think he can do any wrong, to be honest with you. But
Well,
those would
the
be
the
my top.
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory remake wasn't that great.
Okay, yes, that one's not great. It is not great, but that movie will always hold a special place in my heart, because I saw that. I don't even know if my dad's watching this. My parents, especially my dad, tends to see everything I do on social media, but
Nice.
he took me to see that movie in theaters, and he kept saying that I was Violet Beauregard. She's the little spoiled one. And so I'll just never forget that we saw
Yeah,
that one together in theaters. So for that reason, I don't hate the film,
that's
but
fair. That's
it's
fair.
better than that Timothy Chalamet one.
Facts. That no, I totally
Okay.
agree. We're huge Tim Burton fans too. My son is actually named after Jack Skellington. So
Oh, I
yeah,
love
his
that.
his his
Oh,
sisters picked that out. But that's a
oh,
great
I love.
list.
Thank
That is a
you.
very good list. I love that. I, having spent a long time in film and watching lots of movies, feel like I can tell people by their lists. So that I very much like that one. We can continue to be friends.
Yeah. You know what I finally saw this year for
What'd you
the
say?
first time, and I felt so late? Casablanca. Saw it
Oh my
finally,
God.
and I also realized all these years, as I was calling it Casablanca, but the movie they call it Casablanca
Yeah.
instead. That movie was actually really good, and yeah, I really enjoyed that one. If I had to go down the whole rabbit hole of like classic older films,
Yeah.
that's a whole different list.
Oh yeah.
But
You know what? We'll set up a stream and just go over like movies and stuff.
yes,
We had a question about fashion. I'm going to ask you one and then
yeah,
we'll wrap up.
absolutely.
What do you think of Crocs?
Oh no, no, I don't think anything of Crocs.
I don't think anything of Crocs. That's the
Never
soundbite.
have, never will. Not the little charms. No.
That's the first soundbite I'm going to have our editor take out of this. That was amazing.
You
Um,
know, I hear they're comfortable, just like Uggs.
yeah.
Don't like Uggs either. I know
See, yeah.
they're very comfortable, but they're not my thing. And if someone out there is watching this and they're now contemplating on getting rid of their Crocs or Uggs, do not get rid of them because we all have our own fashion style and sense, and what one person feels should not dictate what you decide to wear.
Amen to
I
that.
just choose not to wear them. So
That's fair. That's fair. All right. Last question again, April. Thank you so much. So much insight today. Everybody can do. Do you have a link for Pretty Wired Builds? Do you have a YouTube channel for that?
yeah, and I am like in the midst of updating videos on there. Let me see if I can give
Because it's not
you.
on your LinkedIn. I'll tell you that. Not
Yeah,
that I
I
saw.
doubt that it's on there. I think this is how you do it on YouTube. I just gave it to you in the
Yeah. Let
chat
me
that I
grab
have
it.
to you. Hopefully that works.
Yeah, it did. Hold on.
Yeah, it worked.
Copy link. I'll put it there for everybody, and then in the banner. Boom.
And
There we
thank
go.
you everyone for chiming in the chat. I tried to see the conversations as they were happening, but if anyone ever does have questions, I know my YouTube's been shared here and there, and then and then LinkedIn. You're always welcome to come find me on LinkedIn and ask away. But
Absolutely.
yeah,
Everybody go check out the content on YouTube. Go connect on LinkedIn. Tell her you saw her on the tech commute and really enjoyed the conversation. Hopefully you did. You better have because I
I
did.
hope you did.
Last question for you. What does success look like to April?
Yeah, success for me looks like, am I happy?
Hmm.
If I'm not happy, I haven't reached success. And my definition of happiness changes far too often. So, whatever season I'm in, am I happy? And that's how I define success.
I love that. Well, hopefully in this season, which is now going into fall, the fall season of your life 2025, you are
Mhm.
happy. We all hope that for you.
Yes. Ooh, can I drop an exclusive on
Oh
here
my
before we head
god,
out? Because
yes.
I didn't get a chance to post it on LinkedIn. So now I
Heck
get to
yeah.
say it here first and then follow up on LinkedIn.
Do it.
So, we bought a house.
Let's go.
And I will say next year you'll actually see my new office. I'm actually in the midst of getting the construction done on that one because now that we own the house, I can do construction.
Oh
So
my goodness.
I'll have a whole new space where I'll be doing content next year, and I'm looking forward to that. And so you heard it here first.
Well, I'm coming out there and we're gonna set it up and get the lighting and everything.
Yes.
We'll do it right.
Yes,
That'll be
yes, I
fun.
will be happy for that. I'm combining 2 bedrooms into 1
Oh
as
my
my office.
god. Oh my
Yeah.
god. I'm already thinking depth of field. I'm thinking all these be like, oh, some little
Yes.
like some plants in between just to give us nice texture. Oh man,
Yes.
couple cameras. You have to have a couple
Yes.
different angles. Oh my
Yes. So
goodness.
I'm looking forward. I feel like everything's leading up to this moment. So so hopefully everything comes together the way I envision, but I'm really excited for having a new space. And so yeah.
Absolutely. Well, geez, again, I will point to my 6 foot deep room here, but hey, I can at least play Wes Anderson movies, so
Hey,
I
and
got that
sometimes that's all
confirmed.
that matters.
That is all that matters. Well, thank you so much again for your time. Stay once we end here because I want to say thanks. Yes, congrats.
Yeah,
Everyone loves thy house for you.
yeah,
Congratulations.
thank
And
you everyone.
we'll be back. Remember, hit Community for all of our events the rest of the week. And you can find our Discord and all the yada, yada, yada stuff there. I hope everyone had a great time. Thank you again to April, and thanks to all the people in attendance. I see Roselle was here. It's great to see Roselle and
Yes.
Kanika,
My friends are
Rajneesh,
here.
Linda, Liana, so many fun friends here. So, and remember, everybody, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. Enjoy the rest
Yes.
of your days. Bye, everybody.